Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I'm very happy and excited to be here tonight to welcome the esteemed alumnus of this institution, Celso Amorim. I'm Oliver Authried. I'm president of the Alumni Association of the Diplomatic Academy of Vienna. And it is really a pleasure to be here tonight, not only because, of course, it's always good to have such high-level guests, but also it's his first speaking engagement at the DA, I was told, since my inauguration 10 years ago. So that was when you last in Vienna opened the second year of my academic career, and I think it had a profound impact on my career because it was very inspiring and definitely memorable for myself. I won't go into much detail about the vita of Mr. Amorim because I think Botschafter Brix will step in for that as well. Anyways, however, I want to briefly say a few words about the club, about the Alumni Association. We're closing in on 2,000 members globally. We have over 50 events in 15 chapters worldwide every year. And we also are happy to always increase, of course, our community, but also celebrate those that really have distinguished careers and are outstanding members of the Diplomatic Academy and obviously of the club as well. And I think I don't want to go much into detail about the topic itself. I think it's a very interesting perspective. I'm very much looking forward to it. I personally work in that development cooperation area, so I'm going to be very excited to hear what you will share with us tonight. And I wish you a very nice evening, and please enjoy the talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oliver. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome also you on behalf of the Diplomatic Academy here. And especially let me welcome Celso Amorim, who was student here.
Yes,
the third
67, 66, 67.
67. And please welcome Celso Amorim here in Vienna again. It's difficult to recount all the steps in his distinguished and long career, but let me just say it's good to see that someone who enjoyed the atmosphere here in this academy in the 60s has taken from this atmosphere the possibility to believe in the humanity of people, of young people. You said that once you were here. And at the same time, the respect for plurality in our societies. And I think this was at the beginning of your career, which later on led you to high posts in the UN, ambassador of Brazil, ambassador to the United Kingdom, something we share. I was later on an Austrian ambassador there, and then actually 3 times as member of the government also of Brazil, 2 times as foreign minister.
Well, depends how you count. 4 terms.
4 terms, altogether yes. 4 terms, foreign minister and minister of defense, well, later on, joining many of these international boards who try what we all should do to bring peace and reconciliation to places like Kosovo, Iraq, just to name 2 where you were active. Now you have been appointed to be the chief foreign policy advisor of President Lula in turbulent times. And when we heard that you will come to Vienna, we immediately said, actually, you should help us. You should help us with a topic which is all on our mind all the time, the issue of the global south. But when you look into the definitions and how people use it, there are so many different ways of using it, and some of them are not very helpful. And if I may, at the introduction, say that, for instance, at the last BRICS summit in Kazan, the Russian side said, well, the global south is actually the new alpha and omega of the world, and they even gave it a new name. They call it now the majority, the global majority, not global south, but global majority. And I immediately had the feeling, maybe this is a bit too far, saying that we are forming the global majority, including Russia and these other countries which are involved there. And I felt like someone who believes that analysts sometimes can write up things, a little bit taken back when I read so many Russian analysis papers saying that actually, yes, global majority, that is us. And we should actually make the decisions in this world. So understanding the global south seems to be a very difficult expression, especially because Brazil, the country of the future, is in a different position than most of the countries of what we call global south. And for instance, the group of 77, which now has more than 130 members, is a different thing than what we call the global south. So it's a very complicated matter that we have to deal with. And I'm happy that you agreed to speak on understanding the global south from the Brazilian perspective. I think, let me say, at the moment, it is very important that we really find a way to work together between the European Union and the Latin American countries. And I'm happy that only a few days ago, the Mercosur agreement was at least signed.
No, not signed yet, announced.
It was announced. She signed something. She signed something.
She signed it, she announced.
She signed the document, but maybe not.
No, it meant really. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, what happened important is that it was announced that the negotiations had concluded, and they are now going only through legal questions. You never know what can appear in the legal questions, and of course the ratification process.
Well, at least we are there, and I know it's called legal brushing, what they're now doing. And it will take time. You're here in a country which is a bit critical about the consequences of some parts of the Mercosur agreement. But I do hope, actually for the future of both continents, that it will be possible to finish this. So maybe this is better to talk about these individual contacts and how we can relate without talking about the global south too much. But maybe you will say something totally different. And we are very much looking forward to your talk. You said you will talk between 30 or 40 minutes, and then we will have a question and answer session with the audience. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Well, let me first of all have a technical question. Everybody can hear what I'm saying because I'm with the apparatus here, so I saw them. Anyway, I don't know if you prefer me to try to reply to your question or to go to my prepared speech. But let me, before going to the prepared speech, say that words are very deceitful. Because when we speak of the West, probably we speak of Japan. There are many people in Brazil that consider that we are part of the West, but most of the Western countries don't believe that we are in the West. So it is very complex to try to reply perfectly to your question. I think the expression global south, I don't know who invented it here. I know that President Nyerere of Tanzania was the originator of the South Center and the bigger organization, a stronger organization of developing countries. Of course, today it's difficult to say whether China is a developing country or not. In many respects, yes. In other respects, already it has it has surpassed this stage. So, I mean, I don't think we should be too much stuck to these names. I'm sure that I don't know if it was President Putin or if it was any speaker in Russia that used the global south in their favor. but we try to use it, I mean, in a more neutral one, since we are in a neutral country. I can say that as a positive thing. I mean, if I were in Brazil and I would say that we are neutral, I would probably be attacked by most of the press in Brazil, who believe actually that we are in the West. I don't know if I should go on with that, but anyway, I remember there is a Brazilian film, which is an interesting one. It's a mixture of science fiction with politics, and it has people who come from some country in the north, and their sport is to kill people, to kill people, poor people, and black people, and indigenous people, or whatever. And they have partners in Brazil. And these partners in Brazil say, no, because we are not from this region, the Northeast or whatever. We are from São Paulo and Rio, which is mostly people like us, white people. Huh? They say they are white people? Ha, 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 ha. So, you know, this is very, very, very complex. But anyway, if I'm going to make my written speech, I think I should go up.
Yes, whatever you prefer, but please.
But I keep because I want to see the faces. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the director of the Diplomatic Academy, Ambassador Emil Brix, as he said, ambassador in London, I understand also in Moscow, so a very senior Austrian ambassador, and thank him for his invitation. It is a pleasure to be back to this prestigious institution. To some extent is my alma mater, originally established by Empress Maria Theresa, a remarkable statesperson in the 18th century as the Oriental Academy, I believe. In 2010, as foreign minister, I was invited by the Academy to give a lecture on Brazilian foreign policy. 4 years later, when I was defense minister, I had the honor to join the celebration of the 50 years of the refoundation of the Academy, which took place in 1964, I believe, under the leadership of the great statesman Bruno Kreisky, who later on also became chancellor, I believe. I graduated from the Academy in '67. At that time, Brazil and Austria had very different political systems and political situations. Brazil had been under a military dictatorship since 1964, 1 year after I joined the Foreign Service. You can imagine my disappointment going into a global South country, but democratic one, in 1963, and 1 year later we had a coup d'etat, which, by the way, was supported by most of the Western countries. In Vienna, though the city still had a certain post-war and post-occupation climate, in the Diplomatic Academy I found a vibrant and cosmopolitan environment. Metternich famously said that the Balkans, I also read the Orient, but whatever, Balkans begin at Rennweg. If I could paraphrase the eminent Austrian statesman, I would say that for me, the world at large started here at Favoritenstrasse. Besides my Austrian colleagues, the Academy had a diverse international student body. I remember interactions with diplomats or aspiring internationalists from the United States, the Soviet Union, Poland, Italy, and Palestine, although this one was bearing a Jordanian passport. Interestingly, to a person coming from a country with a strong imprint of population of African descent, it was in Vienna that I had for the first time the chance to not only get acquainted, but get in friendship with colleagues from Africa. The ones I recall more vividly were from Upper Volta, today Burkina Faso, and Niger. The time I spent in Vienna was one of great professional and personal growth. It would be no exaggeration to say that my diplomatic life started here. May I also, in passing, say that my first child was born in Rudolfina House. The plurality in the midst of the Cold War was only possible because of Austria's perpetual neutrality, a constitutional clause that has been followed coherently since 1955. Neutrality requires a capacity for dialogue with counterparts of different origins and ideologies. Again, this is a lesson which I took with me from my period in this house. In Brazil, though the concept of neutrality was never formally applied, our foreign policy has most of the time been based on the idea of non-alignment. This was even true during the military regime, or most of the military regime, even if sometimes in a disguised way. One of Brazilian foreign ministers with whom I worked, Azeredo da Silveira, used to say that Brazil was the only truly non-aligned country, since it was non-aligned even to the non-aligned movement. Brazil, especially under democratic government, has been a strong supporter of non-intervention. This, however, did not prevent us from contributing to peace in other countries when so requested, as in the case of Haiti and to some extent in Bolivia. I used to say that non-intervention needs to be tempered by non-indifference. During my lengthy career, which included ambassadorships at international organizations in Geneva and at the United Nations in New York and London, as you mentioned, I was always inspired by the values of peaceful cooperation which were present in the Diplomatic Academy. The same values guided my actions at the helm of Brazilian diplomacy from 1993 to 1994 under President Itamar Franco, and from 2003 to 2010 under President Lula. The first decade of the 21st century was a period of intense optimism in Brazil. The peaceful transfer of power from President Fernando Henrique Cardoso, an intellectual, a renowned sociologist, to President Lula, a metal worker and a trade union leader, seemed a powerful symbol of the consolidation of democracy. Regardless of the many challenges, both internal and international, Brazil was a country of hope. In an increasingly multipolar world, we saw many opportunities to play a creative role on many pressing issues of the international agenda. Our first priority was to consolidate South America as a zone of peace and prosperity. We saw this as a cornerstone essential to achieve a more significant participation on the world stage. That is why we worked tirelessly to deepen our economic and commercial integration with Mercosur. We also founded new institutions such as UNASUR, which comprise South American countries, and CELAC, which keeps today a dialogue with the European Union and was integrated by countries of is integrated by countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. Our first meeting was near Salvador in Bahia, and it was the first time that Latin America and Caribbean countries, or even Latin American countries only, for that matter, met not under the aegis of any superpower. It was the first time ever in 200 years. These initiatives, of course, drew inspiration to a large extent from the European experience. Brazil has also acted in situations of actual or potential conflict in the region, such as disputes between Venezuela and Colombia, between Colombia and Ecuador. We have also this is the first decade. We have also contributed to appease internal tensions in some of our neighbors, which so requested. That happened in Bolivia when we were asked to be an intermediary between the different factions, speaking about 2007, 2008, more or less. Brazil had been traditionally an important actor in trade negotiations since the foundation of GATT, and more recently at the WTO, whose charter I myself signed with other ministers in Marrakesh. During the Doha round, we have joined forces with India, China, Argentina, African countries, and others to ensure, the Global South, to ensure that the interests of developing countries were properly taken into account. Although in the end we were frustrated by the bickering between some nations, developed and underdeveloped, which led to a failure of negotiations in 2008, at least we avoided a totally biased agreement that would favor rich countries to the detriment of poor ones. We very much regret the weakening of WTO, which in our view should be one of the most important pillars of the multilateral system. When you have trade wars, of course, it becomes very difficult to think of a peaceful context. Let me say also that along the last 3 decades, Brazil put a lot of effort in the European-Mercosur agreement. In the current geopolitical arrangement, we believe that this agreement has a strategic value beyond the trade and should be seen as such by our European partners. I had something to do, I mean, I'm not making, but it did happen in Itamar Franco's government. The first step was made towards this agreement. At the time, the Americans were launching the FTAA, the Free Trade Area of the Americas, as they said, against the Fortress Europe that was built in Maastricht. And we found it was important to have an agreement between the Mercosur, which was the only existing body, with the European Union, a little bit to balance our trade relations. Of course, now relations with China has surpassed, and I mean, just for you to have an idea, we export more to China than the European Union, than to the European Union and the United States combined. Our attachment to multilateralism was not limited to trade matters. It also applied to issues of peace and security. In the first month of Lula's government, Brazil was confronted with the invasion of Iraq without authorization of the Security Council. We had no pains in condemning this action vehemently. This principled position opened the door for a closer relation with the Arab countries. Building on the work we were doing on South American integration, we have launched 2 interregional initiatives which were very original at the time. One between South American, African, and Arab countries, and another one between South American and African countries. There was, I think, the 2 first big interregional organizations. Actually, we were pioneers even in relation to Europe, because Europe later on created a mechanism with the Arab countries, but ours preceded it. Nowadays, we have to revive these things. Together with India and South Africa, we have founded IBSA, a grouping of 3 large multi-ethnical, multicultural democracies, each one in a different continent of the developing world. After a sequence of ministerial meetings, we held the first IBSA meeting in 2006 and went on with a summit every year until the end of Lula's government. Let me say, just in passing, that I had the honor to represent Brazil in Mandela's inauguration, and that's the moment in which this idea came to my mind. I had been to India a little bit before, and I mean, this was the old way to that the Portuguese took. I mean, that South America, South Africa, the Cape of Good Hope to India. IBSA attracted a lot of attention of many countries, mainly Russia and China, and may be said to be somehow at the origin of BRICS. Chinese and Russians should ask why we can't be part of IBSA and so on. And finally, by different reasons, we created BRICS. For its part, BRICS has attracted the interest of many developing countries. Last year in South Africa, the group has arrived at a consensus regarding its expansion. Next year, Brazil will be chairing BRICS in the current extended format. We firmly believe that BRICS can be a positive force in a multipolar world. In a recent conversation with a former colleague of a highly developed nation, this colleague of mine, a bit younger than I am, no, a lot younger than I am, asked me why Brazil was so supportive of BRICS. My answer, which may seem paradoxical, was simple and direct: to reinforce the G20. In other words, we don't want a world exclusively ruled by the G7. So by reinforcing BRICS, we make it clear it's necessary to take into account also the interests of developing countries. And you might remember, when we were speaking of these groups, when the G7 was not the G7 was the G8. And I was in a meeting in Yekaterinburg, and Medvedev was the president of Russia then. I don't know if it coincided with your period, but he said, I have no illusion. We are in the G8 because we have the nuclear bomb. So the G7 continued to be the G7 in terms of economic influence in the world. So the creation of BRICS and the development of BRICS somehow makes it necessary to the G7 to consider the interests of the developing countries, not a la carte, not choosing these or that country to participate in this or that meeting, but as a whole group. Another significant development during President Lula's first 2 mandates was Brazil's participation at the G20 summits after the 2008 financial crisis. Brazil hosted the G20 summit for the first time just 3 weeks ago. It was the first meeting of this level to include the African Union as a formal member. Of course, it had been decided before. The Arab League and the Holy See participated as guests. Another innovation was the social G20, which made it possible for civil society organizations of different countries, including in the last meeting there was an Ukrainian and a Russian, and I was there participating, so I made them shake hands, which I think the Ukrainian did with great. But the Russian, I think, I don't know, maybe he thought he would lose his job or something. But anyway, they did. They shook hands. Another innovation, therefore, is the G20. Alongside the G20 of states, we had the G20 of peoples. We hope this will be a permanent feature of upcoming summits. This is very much, I was talking before about Lula and his aims in Brazil and so on. It's making the people influence government in a direct way. Among the main results of our G20 presidency stands the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, also the call on action, global governance reform, and a consensus on the need to ensure that the ultra-rich are effectively taxed. The first decade of the 21st century was marked by the beginning of a transition from a unipolar world to a multipolar one. Gone were the days in which Madeleine Albright, who was a personal friend, could refer to the United States as the only remaining superpower. You remember that, of course. Normally, those transitions bring along crises and tensions. They were not totally absent in this period, of course, but nonetheless, it's seen from Brazil, it was, as I said, a period marked by hope. Even intractable conflicts, such as the one opposing Israel and Palestine, showed signs of a possible solution. Leaders of both sides appeared to be willing to negotiate. In 2007, the United States called the Annapolis Conference, which tried to revive the roadmap to peace. Brazil, along with the other IPSA members, were among the few developing countries outside the region to be invited. Perhaps the clear example of Brazil's increased participation on the great game of international politics was our involvement in the Iran nuclear issue. Prompted by the United States during the first term of President Obama, Brazil and Turkey negotiated with Iran an agreement by means of which that country would give up some of its enriched uranium in exchange for fuel for its nuclear research reactor. It's a complex question whose details I'll not mention here. But from that resulted the Tehran Declaration. The Tehran Declaration, signed in 2010, was paradoxically rejected by the US government itself. But it got the praise of al-Baradei, who had just left the atomic energy here, and among others, the not high commissioner, I think has a bigger title, the high representative of Europe, Solana. So, but it was rejected by the ones who asked us. But it can be said in some aspects, and I heard that from a high official of the United States, of the Biden government, it paved the way for the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, subscribed in 2015. Of course, we don't have much hope that it will be taken by the next US president, but in any case. The world in 2010 was much less fractured than the world today. President Lula came back to office in 2023 in a strikingly different situation, both internally and externally. In Brazil, democratic institutions had been under threat in the previous 6 years. Lula himself was put in prison, as you know. The full extent of the danger of the actions of the extreme right had not yet been fully understood, neither in Brazil nor in other parts of the world. And this threat has not yet disappeared. On the international level, a perilous conventional war is raging now in the heart of Europe, and an unimaginable human catastrophe with genocidal characteristics is underway in the Middle East. Tensions between nuclear superpowers are at its highest level since the Cuban Missile Crisis. If not properly managed, the rivalry between the United States and China may also become uncontrollable. Some analysts have even spoken of the Thucydides trap in a reference to the dynamics that led to the war between Athens and Sparta in ancient Greece. A pandemic which might perhaps have been avoided if recommendations of the World Health Organization had been followed, has left physical and psychological scars in all of us. And the devastating consequences of climate change seem to hit closer to home by the day. Brazil has decided, especially President Lula, has decided to take up part of the responsibility in facing this threat by chairing the COP30 next year. Despite many differences, the present world situation brings to mind the feeling of instability in the first half of the 20th century, so vividly described by the Austrian author, who died in Brazil, by the way, Stefan Zweig, in his memoirs, The World of Yesterday. Some of his accounts of the zeitgeist of his time have an eerie similarity to today's world. In one passage, Zweig said, and I quote, "I have been defenseless, helpless witness of the unimaginable relapse of mankind into what was believed to be long forgotten barbarism." And he goes on, "There was no country to which you could escape, no way you could buy peace and quiet. At the time, everywhere, the hand of fate took us and dragged us back into its insatiable game." End of quote. But I did not come here with the intention of aggravating the sense of agony of many of us, especially to instill pessimism in the youth. I am a born optimist. I believe that in the middle of darkness, even if there is just a beam of light, you must go after it and enlarge it. This has been our approach to the Ukraine war. Since the beginning, we tried to find ways to contribute in search of peace. Brazil has unequivocally condemned the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and we voted in favor of all the resolutions of the General Assembly, except those that established sanctions. But this would be another subject. However, if we want to go beyond mere condemnation and try to contribute to a solution, you need to think not only about the ideal peace, but also about the possible peace. Pragmatism must go along with our sense of justice. President Lula has sent me as his envoy to both Kiev and Moscow, where I had the chance to meet with President Zelensky and Putin. In these encounters, I have indicated our willingness to contribute to the resumption of talks, so as how the Chancellor of Austria. I participate personally in the so-called Copenhagen process, a series of meetings of national security advisors prompted by Ukraine and some of its Western partners. It also counted with the participation of a small group from the Global South, the so-called Global South. The first of such meetings occurred in Denmark's capital, then the word, Copenhagen process, in the summer of 2023. With time, however, some of us have grown skeptical of the chances of success of this format, in which a growing number of countries were invited, all expressing exactly the same views. For me, since the beginning, the process suffered from an inherent flaw, which was the absence of Russia. As Kofi Annan, for whom I have great admiration, used to say, you don't negotiate with your friends, but with your adversaries. In a meeting in Davos approximately 1 year ago, which preceded the Burgenstock summit, it became clear to me that the process was going nowhere. Since President Lula visit to China, in parallel, early last year, we realized that Brazil and China had similar views on the importance of a political solution to the war in Ukraine. In a succession of meetings I had with my counterpart and Minister of Foreign Affairs, because he has these two hats, when we addressed this question. During a visit I made to Beijing in April this year, we launched the document of 6 points that summarize our common understanding. The 6 points are, in essence, de-escalation, resumption of direct dialogue, humanitarian assistance, opposition to use of weapons of mass destruction, and rejection of attacks on nuclear power plants. The Brazilian-Chinese document also expressed concern with the division of the world in blocks. Under the framework of these common understandings, Brazil and China have launched a group of friends of peace at the margins of the last UN General Assembly. Before going on, I'm almost finishing. I would like to say one thing, because most people see China only as an ally of Russia. But China is a country that is very much interested in globalization. It was the country that grew most of all, more than anyone else, with the peaceful world all these years. So, and also China is a very pragmatic country. We all know that they, I think in 2022, Putin went to China and they signed an agreement in which they speak about friendship without limits. But just 3 weeks later, after the invasion, there were 3 or 4 weeks, there was a vote in the Security Council and China abstained. So pragmatism is very much present as well. Well, this group of friends currently consists of 13 countries of the South: Brazil, China, Algeria, Bolivia, Colombia, Egypt, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, Kenya, Mexico, South Africa, Turkey, and Zambia. So countries of very different ideological colors in their governments. And these were the countries that signed the document. We had some other countries that were invited and are interested but have not signed. And we had also the participation of 3 observers: France, Hungary, and Switzerland. So again, it's of interest. Other nations have displayed their interest now to follow the discussions. The situation on the ground seems to be fast evolving, and the results of the recent US elections have certainly changed the political calculations of all sides. Supposing there is a decision to negotiate, this will involve multiple aspects, some of which may be the object of interim solutions. For instance, precise definition of territorial questions might be one of these issues. Many, I don't want to quote any specific example, but certainly even here in Austria, but beyond, many people know that interim decisions take a long time, and and make it possible to continue with peaceful relations. Even in an interim settlement, like a ceasefire or an armistice, even in an settlement must take into account the legitimate security concerns of both sides. Several authors, from Toynbee to Kissinger, have in different ways referred to the importance of these concerns to Moscow. But Ukraine certainly should be entitled to security guarantees, probably without reference to NATO membership. As in all negotiations, this will require flexibility and creativity on all sides. Maybe history serves as an example. Maybe Vienna, the city that hosted the Congress that established the Concert of Europe, which prevailed for so long during the 19th century, could once again serve as the venue for a conference to redefine Europe's security architecture. Lastly, I would like to briefly mention recent developments of the conflict in the Middle East. The truth is that the conflicts in the Middle East go so fast that this is already, in a way, old, because I don't refer to Syria, for instance. Brazil has always supported, in the case of Israel-Palestine, the two-state solutions. We are encouraged by the approval by the UN General Assembly of a resolution under the leadership of Saudi Arabia and France, which calls for a conference next June on the creation of the state of Palestine. Going back to Zweig, even in the difficult times, we still have reason for hope. And I quote, this is Zweig's words, yet paradoxically, at the same time as our world was turning the moral clock back 1,000 years, I have also seen mankind achieve unheard of feats in the sphere of technology and the intellect, instantly outdoing everything previously achieved in millions of years, end of quote. These are Zweig's words. But Zweig, unfortunately, could not see this brave new world. Let us make the right choice now. I thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Amorim. You spoke about almost everything in this crumbling world order. Thank you very much for that, which I think shows us how much is moving. Dynamics. But do you remember which paper you wrote at the end of your time here in the Diplomatic Academy? Your diploma paper?
No, my biggest quality is to forgot what I did before.
But you shouldn't have, because the title, I only know the title. The title was The Dynamics of North-South Relations in 1967. We have dynamics in the North-South relations now, certainly nowadays. Well, let me ask you one or two questions before I open up to the floor. Maybe on BRICS, you mentioned that actually BRICS was not the origin, but the origin was a meeting between Brazil, India, and China.
And South Africa.
And South Africa. And then it was only discussed to be enlarged. And somehow the Russians also came into this picture. And now we have BRICS Plus, and we had recently a summit in Kazan, and your president did not attend the meeting in Kazan.
Because of health question.
Health question. But some journalists said, yeah, maybe it was a health question, but it was quite convenient, because the politicization...
But it was really health.
It was health.
He didn't go to the meeting of in Azerbaijan also on climate.
So you're not afraid from the Brazilian side that BRICS Plus, or whatever it's called in the future, is too much taken by countries like Russia and China to change the world order according to their likes?
No, I'm not, because if it is too much taken by them, it will lose its efficiency. By two countries, whichever they are. Second, I think Russia and China are very different, although both were communists. Well, China still claims to be communist, but is a very special communism. And Russia is anything but communist. So these are two large countries, very important ones. I think their views are important for the world. So the fact that they discuss with Brazil, with India, with South Africa, on the contrary, may be useful to the world instead of having a world of total shock, as it would be between the United States, maybe, as you may imagine, between the United States and Russia, or United States and China, there is some how do you call that, velvet in between.
You mentioned also from the very beginning the term neutrality.
Sorry?
Neutrality, you mentioned.
Well, it's in our constitution, isn't it?
It's in our constitution. But you also said maybe to a certain extent Brazil has also a policy of neutrality in the world order, which in your country, Brazil, not everybody likes in your country, because many see it as part of the Western world. But I'm not asking about Brazil, but about your view on the role of neutrality nowadays. Because in Austria, we have some sort of discussion on two fronts. First of all, the discussion is it really providing security to the Austrian population in the given situation with the war 450 kilometers away from here, 500.
Brazil was not neutral. I mean, it's different. I said non-aligned, yes.
I know, but in the Austrian case, do you still feel that it makes sense to have neutrality so much in its constitution, or do you think things are so moving so fast that also politics should maybe evaluate what the situation is nowadays and make changes to that? I know you shouldn't give advice to Austria, but from your point of view, far away from in Brazil, what is your view on neutrality?
Well, the Austrians should be the ones that know what's best for them. I mean, so I will not go into that. I would only say that the fact that Austria is neutral makes it easier and more interesting to have, this is a specific case of Ukraine, and maybe other cases, to have a special relation with Austria. Actually, I'm not saying anything and not breaking any confidence if I say that the Swiss, when they first presented to us their idea of the, whatever, that's a very complicated name, Bruggenstock conference, they underlined the importance that they were neutral. So without going into the merits of this affirmation, I think it is, in many situations, international situations, an asset. Whether it's good or not for the Austrians is up to the Austrians to say.
You know, because you said
it's good for Brazil, but for what? We don't know if it's good for Austria.
In Austria, an Austrian population, about 80% say it's good for Austria.
How many?
80%.
18?
80.
1/8?
No, 80.
Oh, 80.
So 80%. So
absolute majority.
Absolute majority. No political party is daring to change it. Therefore, but at the same time, Russia. And the foreign minister and the foreign ministry calls Austria among the non-friendly countries now.
Does it?
Yes.
It's a mistake.
Yes, I think also it's a mistake. But when you said maybe it could be a venue for a Ukraine conference, this will be very difficult for Austria to be accepted, or Vienna to be accepted in the given situation. I would love to say Vienna is the best place for such a meeting.
Well, I'll say very frankly what I think, and with the risks of being frank and transparent. When Brazil and China made this proposal, the 6 points, it's not really a proposal, but like the proposal of principles that should guide a possible negotiation, the Russians were not happy either, because we didn't consult them. And actually, the Ukrainians were also not happy because we didn't consult them. But after a while, they saw that maybe it may be useful. So I would not give too much weight to that affirmation.
That's your optimism that you speak
Yes,
about.
the optimism.
Yes, yeah. Maybe last question from my side. You spoke again about WTO, that we have to save it and improve it and make use of it. And you spoke about the trade relations, the importance of the trade relations. We talked already about Mercosur. What is your advice to us Europeans why we should ratify Mercosur?
Well, it's very different because there are many situations here. But when I ask anyone, I mean, I can understand. Well, why I think it's important, the agreement, I said during the talk that I want a world that is balanced. I don't want to, I mean, as far as I can influence, or Brazil can influence, we don't want a world that is dominated by one country or a group of countries. It's not simple and not easy. At the time, it seemed the United States was the only remaining superpower. So it was interesting to have a strong relation with the European Union, which, by the way, had inspired the creation of Mercosur to a large extent. Everyone, I'm not speaking as a commentator. I was there, and I heard that argument very often being put. And when we decided to be a customs union and not only an area of a free trade area, the example again was Europe. So there was this, let us say, affinity with Europe. So that's how it started. But I still think that even if imperfect, I think the free trade area as such has gone. I mean, everything has limitations. They became more clear and so on. But anyway, if you're able to have, as apparently we I'm no longer a negotiator. I think it's useful. If you want to have a world which is not only China and the US, I think Mercosur, Europe, we do good business with China and also with the United States. But I mean, if the European Union also, together with Africa maybe, can also help in forming a more balanced economy, I think that will be good for the world.
Like-minded countries should work together.
Yes, like-minded at least in some respects. Of course, Brazil has a very different political regime from Venezuela, but also have a very different political, not regime maybe, but political situation from Argentina. But still, we have common problems and we have common interests, and we have to work on them, not on what separates us, but on what unites us. And the agreement with the possibility of the agreement, because it was only an announcement now, but the perspective better than possibility, the perspective of an agreement with Europe was hailed positively in the region.
We have here quite regularly now experts from Spain or from Latin America speaking about regional integration in Latin America. And they all say, we tried almost everything. It does not work. And then I asked, why does it not work? And they said, because integration would mean overcoming ideological differences between the Latin American countries. And many of the big issues in Latin American countries are still based on ideology. Would you agree?
Between the different Latin American countries? Some cases, yes.
Venezuela, Argentina.
No, Argentina now. Well, it was the reverse just some 3 years ago. They had a progressive government, and we have a very obscurantist one. So these are things that happen in politics, and you have to cope with that. But the more integrated we are, the less likely it is that the majority will follow the obscurantist ones, I think.
That's the European experience as well, yes. But I should open really for questions. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for your talk.
You have to speak very loud because I'm almost deaf.
Thank you very much. There we are. We have a mic. Thank you very much for the talk. My name is Maurits. I'm from the Netherlands. Can you hear me?
It's the same, but anyway, go on. Maybe Ambassador can help me.
No, it doesn't work. Yeah, now it works.
Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. So my question is on BRICS Pay and the unit, which was both announced in June 2024 in Russia, an alternative currency to the dollar, an alternative payment system to SWIFT. Would you encourage such a system? Would you say that Brazil has to encourage such an alternative system in relation to SWIFT, especially because Russia really wants such a system to avoid sanctions? First question. Second question is on the meta level, both for Austria and Russia, how can you really be neutral, either in words or in deeds, to countries that try to undermine the post-World War II order and do not respect the integrity of nations such as China in Taiwan and Russia and Ukraine, but also now in Georgia, in Moldova and other countries? Thank you.
Well, we didn't make one question. We made several questions of different nature even. I mean, the idea of stimulating the use of local currencies in the trade of BRICS goes back more than 10 years ago. So has nothing to do with the present situation in relation to Ukraine. These are countries that have important economic relations between them. And of course, I mean, I'm speaking from a purely egoistical point of view. It's very difficult for Brazil, for instance, to buy fertilizers from Russia or sell meat to Russia because of the sanctions in a situation in which we were not involved. We didn't have anything to do, really, with that. 40 years ago, and so there was a small war. Fortunately, it was very small between Ecuador and Peru. I don't think you would like to be prevented from buying bananas from Ecuador because somehow you might consider that Ecuador was the weaker part. So I don't think this has nothing with the problem. We consider the idea of having one of the reasons why now we consider important to have the possibility of a common currency, or at least having trade using national currencies, is precisely to avoid being the side effect. Brazil was not meant to be hit by the sanctions, and still it was. So we don't know. If we don't want to meddle with this question, or even if we wish, we are not the cause of the problem, and why should we suffer from it? So this is an addition. But much before that, monetary policies based on one single currency very often affect other countries. When there was the monetary easing, for instance, this affects the interest rate all over the world, the degree of investment in Brazil or Russia or Austria for that matter. So you created the euro. Nobody saw a problem in creating the euro. So I don't see any problem, political problem, and I think it's very complex. So it won't happen quickly, in my opinion, but I don't see any problems. We started having an attempt with Argentina to have payments in local currencies. Unfortunately, it was very limited for different reasons. But still it helped. It especially helped small and medium enterprises which didn't have easy access to the US dollar and still could trade. So I don't see any problem with that. You made so many questions, including the possibility of invasion of Taiwan. I think I'll leave that for some other time. We follow the one China policy, but we believe it has to be solved in a peaceful way.
But there was this big question about whether the post-World War II order has been broken by Russia when they invaded Ukraine. That was your question, actually, mainly. Whether this was really a Zeitenwende, a real break of the Second World War order. Would you agree?
Well, first, I don't think the Second World Order is sacred. Many countries were, I mean, if you take the IMF or the World Bank, they were totally geared towards the European and the US. For instance, I mean, even in a body that is devoted to environment, the GEF, it takes 3 countries of Latin America. I don't supposedly Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia to have 1 chair, whereas Netherlands or Belgium or Switzerland has also 1 chair. So I think the post-Second World Order corresponded to the situation that actually the original idea of Lord Keynes was not even to create bank, World Bank, as the international and reconstruction and development. It was only reconstruction. It was because of the fight of Latin American economists that became reconstruction and development. Anyway, I will not cry for the break of the order that was created. Can you imagine, for instance, that in 1890, the world, or just before the First World War, that the world should be ruled by the notions of the Congress of Vienna? Impossible. So it has to change. It has to adapt.
Well, this is a position we hardly ever hear here in Europe. It's good to hear it, yes. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Gerhard Zeller from the Austrian Foreign Ministry. Thank you for a visit, indeed. 2 questions. The first question, when I read through the final declaration of the BRICS summit in Kazan, it has 134 paragraphs. There's only 1 single slim paragraph actually that mentions even Ukraine. In general terms, there is a lot on southern Lebanon, Syria, Middle East, a lot of subjects with many paragraphs. Does this really reflect the attitude or the discussion in the BRICS that, okay, there is this war, but it has only, let's say, the right to 1 slim paragraph, or is it more intentionally to downplay? Second question is concerning European Union, Brazil. As I happen to be also in the team of the 2006 European and Caribbean summit here in Vienna, where President Lula and US then foreign minister took part. One of the indirect outcomes of this summit was to increase the strategic partnership with Brazil. And 1 year later, the first European Union Brazil summit took place, which before only was taking place with Mexico as individual country. It was on energy and many other subjects, but it did not really, at least it looks like it did not develop a lot in the next decade. And now having Brazil a lot more engaged in the G20 and in the BRICS, is this the price, let's say, that Europe pays to have a little bit neglected this angle of cooperation? Thank you.
Well, during 10 years of this period, I was either defense minister, in which I was concerned with other subjects, including the Truth Commission, a very important aspect in Brazil, or I was out of government. So I cannot say exactly whose mission it was. I would hope that it can. I remember very well the first meeting. The idea came in, as you said, in 2006. the first meeting took place in Lisbon, 2007, and I would very much hope that this would be taken up again. I think it's very important. It's beyond let us say, the mainly economic agreement that we are now signing with Mercosur, and also because there are differences, as it was pointed out, between different countries. So I think I value very much that I signed all these documents, as you know. I value, but under the orientation of President Lula, of course. So I would hope that that would come back. And I don't know if by chance I read in the comments, I don't know if it was you who wrote, but anyway, I read about in the comments about this the announcement of Mercosur European Union references to these Brazil-European Union strategic partnership. No, we value that very much. But you know, we had 2 years which got out of our normal priorities. And then 4 years of total obscure government in Brazil, which was unable to see anything else but its own beliefs or its own formulations. So we cannot count this period as a normal period in Brazil.
Ambassador, he tried to criticize the European Union side, not your side, actually.
No, yes. So, but that's why. But I think I can see that it would be very difficult for the European Union to cooperate with Brazil at Bolsonaro's time. I mean, someone who doesn't believe in human rights, someone who doesn't believe in any progressive idea, someone that doesn't believe in justice, someone. So now it takes time. Now I think it would be a good moment to relaunch it. So Austria can do that.
And there was the second question about Ukraine. Why is only one small paragraph in the final document of the Kazakh?
One small paragraph or no paragraph at all?
It's one paragraph.
Oh, that's enough.
134, I think.
In my opinion, that's enough. We should adopt the Sino-Brazilian document.
There the Austrian position is a bit different, Ambassador.
We disagree.
We disagree. We have there and there. Yes, let's start. Yes, please.
Hello, thank you very much for your talk, Ambassador. I'm also from Brazil. I'm studying here at the DA, and I'm writing about the so-called South for the Polemics magazine of the Diplomatic Academy. My question is also about BRICS. So I'm interested to know your opinion about the challenge of BRIC expansion, especially during the next Brazilian chair. Thank you.
I'm not sure I heard well, so I don't know if...
She's writing an article. She's a student, a Brazilian student here.
Yes, that I understood.
Yeah, and she's writing an article about BRICS and the Brazilian position, and what your position is on the expansion of BRICS, or what the Brazilian position is.
Well, I don't think that we should be close. I mean, I think the same debate happens. It's different because it's, of course, it has different characteristics. But anyway, this debate happened in the European Union as well, I suppose. I suppose, no. I remember a book written, Europe at 6 and 7, so it was the EFTA and... did you belong to EFTA or not?
Yes.
Yes. EFTA and the common market then. But anyway, so I am not against expansion. I think it should be moderate, and I think it should take into account those that really help the cause of developing countries, not just sum up. I don't think that would be useful. But, you know, it's a group of countries, so we have to reconcile some ideas. So I would hope that now we take some time to increase again the number. There is maybe 1 or 2 exceptions of countries that I think should have integrated since the beginning.
Thank you.
The Ambassador of Sudan in the second row, please. Yes.
Thank you very much for this very insightful lecture, we can say. I have 2 questions. The first one is, how do you see the future of multilateralism and international law in such a challenging time? The reason I'm raising this question because when we speak about international law, and for instance, our partners here in the European Union and the West general, they only speak about Ukraine. But when it comes to the Middle East, they didn't speak about international law. And when it comes about the invasion of Iraq, there is no international law at that time. And the other factor also is this tendency towards right-wing politics, which is also, we can say, in a way, it is anti to multilateralism. So how can we enhance multilateralism and the UN at its heart in such a challenging time? This is the first question. Second one is, how do you see the future of the Pact of the Future when we compare it, for instance, with the MDGs and the SDGs? The MDGs, I mean, we agreed on them in 2000, and the level of implementation was very low. In 2015, we agreed on the SDGs, and also the level of implementation is not encouraging. Up to now, at the end of, as we speak, it is only 15% of the SDGs are on track to be achieved by 2030. So now, how do you think that the future, I mean, is it going to be the Pact of the Future, is it going to to make a difference for those millions of people in the global south who are suffering from abject poverty, malnutrition, and the other challenges? What will be the difference in the future of Pact of the Future compared with the SDGs and the MDGs? Thank you very much.
Ambassadors, the questions are getting bigger and bigger. Bigger and bigger.
I'm sorry, but I'm not sure
the first one
precisely. Maybe
what happens to international law when we have all these double standards? Everybody is talking about in the West about Ukraine and international law. Nobody is talking about international law in the case of Iraq and other cases. And the second question was actually then on the SDGs. About the SDG Special Development Goals and how little we have achieved, and what you have to say about the future of our objectives there.
Well, the world is quite unfair, isn't it? And we have to try to improve it somehow. We could quote many examples. You mentioned one which is absolutely true. I mean, when there was the invasion of Iraq, most of the world stood quiet and did not ask for permission of Security Council, did not even call it invasion, gave it a different name, I don't know, the intervention or whatever. So who dominates the world dominates also the narrative normally. So we also, one of the merits of BRICS and other groupings of developing countries is to present a different narrative to what's happening. I mean, when you hear you speak about environment, I'm not saying you personally or anyone here in this room, but when the developed world speaks about environment, it only speaks about burning of forests, which, by the way, we are totally against, also are concretely taking all the measures we can. Nobody speaks about a lack of financial support for the necessary measures, for instance, for adaptation. Take small countries, the small islands in the Pacific, take the Caribbean, or take even other areas that suffer from desertification or whatever. When we were in Copenhagen 14 years ago or so, 15 years ago, I believe, in a COP, it was promised that would be $100 billion per year. Where are they? I mean, nothing, or some very small part of it. So I think each one tends to make his own or her own narrative. And I think one of the merits of the developing countries being united is to make another narrative of what's happening in the world. For instance, people put a lot of fault even in this country, I'm sorry, but generally in Europe on the question of migration. But they forget that, in a way, migration has to do also to the colonization. Maybe not of Austria, which was not a colonizing power, but there are many powers that colonized Africa or colonized other parts of the world, and they are receiving back. It's like the second day after a big drink. I mean, if you're in a hurry, you're drinking, you don't think that there will be a following day. So this is what's happening to a large extent today. So we have to learn to deal with the narrative. The problem is not migration. The real problem is keeping poor the countries from where the migrants come.
So we still have a hangover from colonization.
Hangover was the word that I was trying to do, yes.
Yes, please.
I appreciated your talk, and especially ending with optimism and to look where there's a glimmer of light to follow that. And what advice would you give to somebody from Chicago who's happy burying his head in the sand in Vienna after the last U.S. election, where you have an incoming president who admires strong men who you suffered through much of your early life? Where do we find a glimmer of light? What advice would you give to somebody from the U.S. to the world after January 20th?
What was the precise question?
Yeah, so in the U.S., there was just an election where there is a man coming into power who admires the strong men. He says he's going to act like what you've experienced in Brazil, but in the U.S. What is your words of hope? Where is there a glimmer of light that
well,
I admire optimism?
Where it comes. Maybe from his, I mean, you can't really paint anything with one single color. And maybe, I'm not sure yet, pragmatism might play a role in helping to solve certain questions. I don't know yet, but I mean, in politics, I think, as in life, everything is a bet. You bet it will be right, but you cannot be sure. Speaking of men of strength, I believe Lula is a strong man, not because he has nuclear bombs with him, but because he has good arguments. And these still play a role in the world. I was involved in WTO negotiations, and I honestly think that very often people try just to cheat us. It was not anything sophisticated. But when we were united and we created a G20, which has nothing to do with this present G20, it was the G20 of the WTO involving developing countries, things tend to change, and to change even in the NGOs in developed world. I remember, for instance, to give one example, Mary Robinson, defending our cause, defending, for instance, the countries that produced cotton, mainly, we also did, but mainly in Africa, and which could not face the US or European, but more the US, but also European subsidies. So you defended, the big developed countries defended fair trade in the products, free trade, in the areas that they were interested, but not in the areas that could benefit developing countries. On the contrary. So, in spite of that, the discussion, the discussion when it became really broader and involved countries like Sudan or, let us say, Latin American countries together, these became more respected. And at least, I mean, as I said about WTO, I'm absolutely sad that we were not able to finalize the Doha round, but at least we didn't have a round against us, which was, in the beginning, to be quite frank and simple, based on alliance between the United States and Europe, in which they negotiate with each other their own difficulties and then put on us in face of a fait accompli. So I believe that logical arguments, they are not definitive maybe because interests speak louder, but they have also a role. I believe in what the Italians call il discorso. So that's the method.
Let's hope that the future president is of the same opinion, that he believes in dialogue. It will be difficult, as we all know. Thank you, but thank you for your answer. I have still one more question in the last row. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Johannes Merck. I am teaching here at the DA Latin America. I have lived 15 years in Mexico, and I see former students and current students, and we have discussed several issues, including your foreign policy of Brazil, and I have followed it very closely, and I was very impressed by this initiative you have mentioned at the beginning, IPSA. That was out of the Brasilia Declaration and this formation of a like-minded bloc, as you said, India, Brazil, South Africa, multicultural representative democracies representing the Global South with the IPSA Fund, trying also to be a development donor for the Global South, from a Global South perspective. Today you brought in this Global South perspective. By the way, those who have discussed this issue with Ukraine, 90% of this globe has no sanction against Russia, no African country, no Latin American country, just to be reminded that the world is bigger than this conflict. And my concrete question is, do you think that the IPSA project and this IPSA idea should come back more profoundly, or you think it's strategically better for Brazil go for BRICS enlarged, which you rightly pointed out, you have a lot of contradicting interests. So what do you think is this positioning of the Global South? Yeah? You come out from the tradition of Bandung, yeah, from this tradition of the decolonized countries at 55. So my question actually is where the Global South heads towards more this idea of IPSA, yeah, and looking for more like-minded countries in IPSA style, or do you think it is more pragmatic and more efficient for Global South countries go the BRICS plus path?
What's your name again, and what's your nationality?
I'm Austrian, and my name is Johannes Merck.
I would like to have a long dialogue with you, because you seem to be reading my mind.
Yes.
So
sorry, I have to say something.
You seem to be. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Sorry,
I'm not sure. I think at this moment.
Sorry, I have to leave in about 10 minutes because I have a class at.
No, I can promise you that my answer will take less than 10 minutes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
So I think this is a very good question. I think they play different roles. IPSA was extremely useful for us to make up the basic ideas that we needed for the South in general, so much so that other countries like Indonesia, other countries were either thought, either they themselves expressed or some other people expressed on their behalf the desire to join the IPSA. And actually, we had at least, when I was foreign minister, at least one meeting which was IPSA +1, when Indonesia was with us in the General Assembly in 2010. And IPSA was influential in these areas, again, so much so that in the conflict between Israel and Palestine, the foreign minister of Palestine traveled half of the world to have a breakfast with the IPSA ministers, because it was the only time available, because we had the IPSA meeting and then we had a BRICS meeting and so on. I think they play different roles. In a world in which you have nuclear powers, in a world in which, let us say, the dollar, plays such a big role, IBSA is powerless. You know, it is power. It has soft power, but soft power very often it is important, and Brazil cultivates it, but it's not enough. So I think you have to somehow balance the two memberships. I suppose that for some questions, IBSA will be still important, and we are trying to revive it, trying to have again a meeting of IBSA at leaders level. Unfortunately, it was interrupted at some point. Lula, I don't know if I said here or somewhere else, but he participated in 5 summits every year, going to India, South Africa, whatever. So I think this IBSA really is very important. But this is, let us say, well, I used to say, maybe it's not so true now because there have been changes in the different countries. IBSA was a marriage of affinities, and even if it's 3 instead of 2, but anyway, it was a marriage of affinities. BRICS is a marriage of interests. The two are valid.
I think this was a very good last words of our speaker tonight. The world of interests and convenience and all
affinities.
And affinities. We need all 3 of them.
Sorry?
We need all 3 of them, I guess.
We have the 3 of them. We need the 3 of them.
Yeah. I guess we should say thank you to our speaker. Also thank you not only for what he said, but also that he's ready to come back to this place where he had been educated so long ago. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm giving back.
And we are looking forward when you come next time to Vienna.
Okay, in 10 years if I'm still alive.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.